Any questions?
It's a lot fast, I know.
It's a lot. I know. And thank you so much for that thorough presentation. I'll give it another second if anyone thinks of anything. I know Joni might have to hop off a little early because I know usually at the end of all the presentations we have time for discussion, but she might not be able to stick with us till the end. So here's your opportunity now if you have any questions for Prince William.
Joe?
Conrad, okay.
Yeah,
Please,
just first compliments to Joan for excellent presentation, and then a quick question. Could you say a little more about your cooperative agreements with Manassas Park? And what is the purpose of those agreements, and what have they achieved?
So the cooperative agreements, the cities of Manassas do not have the population to be able to be an urban entitlement. So we collaboratively include them within our plan, our 5-year plan, our annual action plan, so that those citizens may also have the benefit of the CDBG, the home, and the ESG funding. So we have to, per HUD guidelines, we have to do a new cooperative agreement if there are changes in those agreements every 3 years. And so we continue to reach out to those entities and say, are you willing to be a part of this? Because our funding also helps the cities of Manassas and Manassas Park, their citizens.
Thank you. That was very helpful, Joe.
You're welcome. Thank you.
So just a couple questions in the chat from Hillary. She's curious about receptions locally by the residents to changes that are proposed. And I'm assuming that's around the comp plan. Is that right, Hillary?
Well, it was a long time coming, long Board of County Supervisor meetings, sometimes into the next day, mostly around the area that is called the Rural Crescent. And so there's going to be a lot of a look at that to try to provide more affordable housing, the rezoning and so forth. And it's a known fact that more housing needs to be available. I think Prince William County is fairly affordable because our rents are less than our neighboring jurisdictions. And we are kind of looked at like a bedroom community, if you will, because a lot of people, will come and live here, but work outside of Prince William County in neighboring jurisdictions. So all in all, the housing chapter did not receive a lot of negative reception from the community, because it is something that everybody would like to see is more affordable housing.
That's great. Thank you, Joni. And really just kind of a follow-on question from Alice at Alliance for Housing Solutions. She's wondering if there's any effort to advocate for local funding for affordable housing through this process.
Well, when the affordable housing ordinance will be funded locally from the county, because we cannot use our federal funds for that purpose outside of the programs that we are already administering. And so it will be a whole new division within the county for the affordable dwelling units. So yes, the county is very much on board. The Board of County Supervisors are very proactive, and they will be providing the funding to get that division up and running.
And do you have any sense of the timing? I know it's been a long time coming and still more to come, but any sense from your end?
I do not.
Okay.
I couldn't speak to that. We are in the process. We are meeting. And like I said, this is exciting because we've talked about affordable housing for years, and we actually have become a part of the housing chapter. And it's the first step to progress. So I'm very excited about that. And I'm going to be reaching out to the partners to help me. I know Helen has an active program. I know Tom does. And I'm really new to the whole concept of beginning the program. So I really hope that you all can help me.
That's wonderful. I am sure they will. I'm sure a lot of our housing practitioners as well are here, and look forward to staying in touch with you, Joni. And really, I'm so grateful for you to join this housing director's call. I mean, I think it is an important, Prince William is such an important part of our Northern Virginia region, and a lot of opportunity and expansion there. So thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, appreciate you. So we're going to move on now to John Hall with Loudoun County. John, again, just very happy to have you. Welcome to the Northern Virginia Affordable Housing Alliance, and thank you so much for taking the time to share your thoughts and comments about what's happening in Loudoun County around affordable housing.
Thank you, Jill, and good morning, everyone. On behalf of the Board of Supervisors for the County of Loudoun, I'm John Hall, and I'm representing the Department of Housing and Community Development this morning. I'm also joined by my Assistant Director, Brian Regan. So just in case I need an insurance policy, he is here for me, as today represents my 5th month on the job. So I am learning the historical references with Loudoun, but I don't know everything. And I also want to take the moment to just give a special shout out to Conrad Egan. I haven't seen you in so long, and so I'm really ecstatic to be back in the region and to reactivate networks. So good to see you, and I will be in touch. So we are very excited here in the County of Loudoun, but it's been a long time coming, just as Joan mentioned in her presentation. Prince William and Loudoun County, where I always viewed us kind of like on the outskirts, and that's where growth was really moving. So over the last basically 10 years, Loudoun County has been really building up to this moment to be able to address housing head on. So 10 years ago, we started with a stakeholder group to really begin the conversation, a serious dialogue on housing and how to keep affordability intact. 4 years later, there was a housing summit, and then 4 years after that, the county actually adopted an unmet housing needs strategic plan. Now, this strategic plan is going to be the footprint and the source document for DHCD here in Loudoun County, but for developers who want to do business in Loudoun County, and for everyone who wants to know what's happening. This document is the source document that we will be operating over the next 5 to 10 years. And then just last April, our agency or department was formed and launched. So we are in our infancy stage. And Joan, I have to tell you, we'll be walking hand in hand throughout the process as we both are going through this journey. So we offer rental programs just as probably all of the housing departments in Northern Virginia. A few of them I'm just going to highlight. Affordable Dwelling Unit Program. We offer this program. One of the things that I have gleaned from Loudoun County's administration of this program, again, we are in a high housing cost area. So we limit, actually, we have a minimum income requirement to participate in our ADU program. And that was kind of novel to me, simply because the rents are so high. You have to earn at least 30% of the area median income, and then we cap it at 50% maximum. We too are a housing authority. We do not have a public housing sector with Section 9, but we do administer the Section 8 Housing Choice Voucher Program. We are looking for ways to increase our voucher utilization. Similar to Prince William, our waiting list has not been open in over a decade. I think ours has been about 12 years. Our admin plan, as a consequence, has not been updated. And so we are in the process of making those updates, modifications, and I'm hopeful and have the expectation we will be opening our waiting list most likely by the end of summer. We also offer a comprehensive apartment rental guide, as well as participated in the state's rental assistance program. Some of the home ownership programs that we offer, continuing with ADU, we have a purchase component to that, as well as some key down payment closing cost assistance programs. And my motif here is that Loudoun County is a high housing cost county. And so we are working actively to find ways to help bring housing stability for residents. through workforce housing, and we have a program for our public employee grant program, as well as our traditional housing down payment housing cost assistance programs that many of you have. And then we have a couple of programs from the state that will also help to mitigate the effects of the high housing cost area. And then once you're in the home, you want to stay in the home and you want to preserve the capital integrity of the home. And so we have a couple of home improvement programs I wanted to highlight. The home accessibility and repair program is similar and used from our community development block grant dollars. And if you can go to the next slide, I'm on that slide, yeah. And then we have two programs from the state, Granting Freedom program, as well as the rental unit accessibility modification that we administer to help people age in place. The next slide will will give you an overview of some of the funding and the projects that we have underway or just completed. These projects leverage some local dollars. We have a $32 million housing trust that we are administering and looking for more participation in the future to attract innovative developers. We want to do things such as permanent supportive housing by having interdepartmental collaborations with our Department of Family Services and our Mental Health and Behavioral Services Department. We will hopefully be offering a consolidated RFP here in the near future. Some of the investments, I'm not going to go through all these bullet points, but what I do want to highlight on the investment is that the county has waived about $210,000 for developers. Now, what we hear from our developers is, we need more, we need more. So we have a few advisory board panels where developers participate. And so we are exploring ways with our planning and zoning office as they are undergoing a significant zoning ordinance rewrite to really find ways not to be an impediment, but to facilitate projects getting done. The bottom of this slide, I wanted to highlight a few things on here as well. So over the last 5 years, we've been able to effectuate about 858 affordable apartments. Again, that was before we were a department. We were under the county administrator's office, and prior to that, we were embedded within the Department of Family Services. So this current board has had a strong focus on affordable housing by committing resources, by launching this department and creating human capital, which is why I'm here, as well as a lot of hires we have made over the last 12 months. Now, the bottom of the slide indicates what we have in process. And so we have about 300 units that are under construction right now and should be online by the end of this calendar year. And we're very excited. 300 is a nice number. Our research and marketing tells us we need to be at the 1,000 unit mark, but we can't go from 0 to 1,000. So we're at 0 to 300 at the moment, and we will keep climbing. And that is one of the reasons why I want to highlight that we are open for business, looking for developers to participate who have an affordable housing primary mission. The next slide just gives you a snapshot. This is from last summer about the condition in Loudoun County. So rents are about at 2,100 now. I think we're at 2,138 the last time I saw. And the number below that I want to highlight. So just to be able to afford rent, that's about 2,100. A household would have to make about $73,000 just to maintain affordability. So there's a
Sorry, John, I'm so sorry to interrupt you. I just want to ask if you could go ahead and put yourself on mute. I think that might be Stuart. Thank you. Thank you. Sorry.
No problem. So you see the huge disparity there, and there are significant gaps in income that a lot of residents are struggling to keep up with rent or over housing. We hear a lot of concern and feedback and advocacy for us to do more. We are using our ARPA dollars. We will have a separate RFP coming out soon to help families address their rent cost burden. And hopefully we will be able to build more units that will increase the supply, that will hopefully decrease the pricing with competition, but that's going to take some time itself. So the next few slides I want to talk about quickly are this unmet housing needs strategic plan that I mentioned is our source document. It is the go-to document for Loudoun County. This document was adopted in September of 2021, but we are just now really gaining momentum. It has 5 core objectives. And the next slide, I want to dive into what those objectives and strategies are. So I'm not going to read everything here, but you can see the 5 objectives are to establish a housing network, which we're doing today, secure land resources, obtain funding, increase access, and adopt policies. So the items listed here on this slide are some of the things that we anticipate occurring. And on number 3, the column number 3, if you go down to number 17, I just want to highlight this: secure home funding. So Loudoun has not had home funding. So Joan, you mentioned that the groups had home ARP, and I was like, actually we didn't. But just on Friday, last Friday, we were allocated home dollars. So we're very excited in Loudoun County to be getting to the grown-ups table and to be growing and getting more resources to do business that addresses housing affordability in the county. The next slide, we'll just talk a little bit about some of our housing goals and targets that we've had. So again, we really need to be at 1,000 units, but when we were in our startup phase, the strategic plan is basically saying we should produce about 500 units per year. The right 2 columns, the new units and the access to units, you basically add those together to get the totals. New units are what they are: new units, new construction. The access to units are really units where either they're coming online because of home ownership or rental assistance, or that we're preserving affordability in a particular unit. And so we are hovering around so far the 705 mark since the plan was adopted. And this plan basically tells us we need 16,000 units by 2040, 8,000 roughly for new construction, 8,000 for just preservation of units or rental subsidies. So we are marching toward those goals over the next few years. The next slide, we'll just talk about some of our highlights to date. Is that, you know, we were established last year. We received some of the Amazon Reach funding from the state. We have granted waivers. This says up to 100,000, but we're at 210,000 now. We're doing some adaptive repurpose developments with a school here in Loudoun County. We have allocated a half-cent penny tax dedicated for affordable housing. This is the first time ever affordable housing will be in Loudoun County's budget. And so that is something to really shout about. And I mentioned the home fund designation. So with that, that concludes my presentation, and Brian and I are available to answer questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, John, so much. Really appreciate that update. It's exciting to see all the things that are happening in the works. Any questions for John or Brian at Loudoun County? Feel free to put it in the chat, or if you want to raise your hand, I can call on you. Okay, Stuart.
Hey, sorry everybody for that fun from the kitchen in the Schwartz household. Quick question, and I might have missed it in the earlier part of your presentation. Do you set a priority on location of your housing? Because ideally it will be in a walkable neighborhood with walking access to services, as well as where there's good frequent transit, so that we can maintain lower combined housing and transportation costs.
I didn't talk about location or priorities, but yes, transit-oriented development is a proven method to have sustainability and walkable communities. That is definitely an approach and a strategy. One of the things that we're challenged with here in Loudoun County is land availability. in case you haven't heard, we have quite a few data centers, and there is a competition with groups buying up land. And so that is going to be one of our challenges that we're going to have to overcome. So right now we're starting to look at all of the county owned land and what we can do to strategically put properties, affordable housing properties on those particular tracts of land, while at the same time trying to affirmatively further fair housing by not concentrating poverty in one area. So we want to do a lot of mixed income developments. We have been doing some developments where we have our project-based vouchers. A lot of developers will use about 8 of our vouchers simply because of financing goals and strategies that they have. So we're sprinkling vouchers in some of the sites as well.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, all right. Well, thank you. Thank you so much, John. We're happy to have you back here in the region. Look forward to working with you further. Thank you, Brian, for being here as well. I hope you can stay on the rest of the call with us in case something pops up. Feel free to go ahead and put it in the chat. So really appreciate having Loudoun participate too.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to move over to Fairfax County, and Tom Fleetwood, Director of the Department of Housing and Community Development, is here with us. So Tom, welcome.
Good morning, everyone. It's great to see so many friends on the call. Was really looking forward to doing this today. I'm going to cover a little bit of an overview about the work that we're doing, and then dive right into some of our progress relative to affordable housing development. Go ahead to the next slide. So for those of you that aren't familiar, we have a really unique setup here in Fairfax County, where we have both a housing authority that is a separate political subdivision of the Commonwealth of Virginia, and we have a Department of Housing, which serves as the administrative staff to the Housing Authority. The FCRHA owns thousands of affordable units across the county. It serves as the county's local housing finance agency, and we also administer the Housing Choice Voucher Program here in Fairfax County. We are one of HUD's moving to work agencies. And we have converted all of our former public housing portfolio under the rental assistance demonstration. We are working to achieve some important goals that our Board of Supervisors has set forth for us, including creating 10,000 net new affordable homes by the year 2034. So we are using our Moving to Work authority to innovate and to adapt our federal programs to be able to further that goal, particularly with respect to being able to serve people with extremely low incomes in new affordable housing development by deploying project-based vouchers. With respect to housing development, this year alone, we had our notice of funding availability included $52 million, which is the largest NOFA that we've ever released. And currently we have over 1,000 homes that are under construction right now, and more than 2,000 in our development pipeline, with many more on the way. Go ahead to the next one. So this is just kind of an overview of the projects that are currently under construction. And as you can see, they are in locations all over Fairfax County. Fairfax County is 400 square miles, and we are developing new housing from the Drainsville district in the north to the Mount Vernon district in the south, and everywhere in between, including adjacent to George Mason University near the city of Fairfax. Go ahead to the next slide. In our development pipeline, we have over 1,000 over 2,000 units in the pipeline. We have some preservation work that we're doing. But largely what we're doing is new affordable housing development on property that is owned by the housing authorities. So we're putting in publicly owned land in order to be able to provide that as part of the subsidy for affordable housing development. Okay, going into a little bit more detail. Again, we have a goal of creating at least 10,000 new homes affordable to households earning 60% of the area median income and below. One of the key tools that we use, as I said, is our public land, using the Public-Private Educational Facilities and Infrastructure Act of 2002, or PPEA. It's a procurement mechanism that we are using to be able to put our land into these deals. We are in our most recent fiscal year, we've had a number of projects that are moving forward that we're very proud of. On your right, on the right side of the slide at the top, is the residences at North Hill, which is on 33 acres of housing authority owned land. It is a mixed tenure type, intergenerational property that is just about to open. It includes 279 units of affordable rental housing, including 63 units for seniors, plus 175 market affordable townhouses and a 12-acre passive park on a piece of property that had sat fallow for almost 40 years and had formerly been the location of a manufactured housing park. Oakwood Senior Apartments. This was the first example of the Board of Supervisors transferring property to the Redevelopment and Housing Authority for the development of new affordable housing. This is in partnership with APA, and the piece of property actually used to be a defunct stormwater management facility that is now being converted to 150 new affordable senior homes in the Franconia district. It's quite close to the Van Dorn Metro. At the bottom there, Somos is a new development that we're working on in the Providence district in the Tysons Urban Center, within a quarter mile of the McLean Metro stop. This is an SCG project, and we are expecting it to deliver 450 new homes. Go ahead to the next slide. With respect to preservation, we've got a number of important projects that we're moving forward. First of all, just taking a step back, our Board of Supervisors has endorsed the principle that there should be no net loss of our existing either committed or market affordable housing. And we have some examples here that I'd like to highlight. Our Little River Glen property, which, as many of you know, is a senior property just to the east of the city of Fairfax. It is well loved and heavily utilized and is in need of a significant renovation. We're hoping to move forward with that very shortly. Lake Ann House, which is Enterprise Community Partners, is preservation by replacement. So this is brand new construction of 240 units that have been delivered at historic Lake Ann in Reston. And for those of you that can do so, I'd really encourage you to visit the property. It is absolutely gorgeous. And Enterprise Community Partners did an excellent job with that one. At the bottom there, the landings. These were two properties in the southern part of Fairfax County that were market affordable and that we worked with our friends at AHC to acquire and preserve over the long term as affordable housing. Go ahead. In terms of financing affordable housing, in FY22 alone, we put in almost $150 million into deals that we have going right now, as well as a substantial amount of federal funds. You see they're detailed on the left. I'll talk a little bit about the projects that we're financing. Dominion Square West, which is the one on the top, is going to be 550 multifamily units and a Fairfax County Community Center on 2 acres of land just to the south of the Spring Hill Metro Station, the Silver Line Metro Station, also in the Tysons Urban Center. This is a project with APA and is being financed in part with a $55 million loan from the Amazon Housing Equity Fund. In the middle there, our partners at Wesley Housing just celebrated late last year the opening of the Arden, which is 126 new units of affordable housing on Huntington Avenue, almost literally right next to the Huntington Metro Station. Absolutely gorgeous new facility, and Wesley has also moved their headquarters into the building. So great example of a mixed use affordable housing development being delivered here in the county. At the bottom is Ovation at Arrowbrook. This is an SCG project that's being delivered very close to the Innovation Station, just north of the town of Herndon. It will include 274 multifamily affordable units. Go ahead to the next slide. In Fairfax County, we also have a robust set of inclusionary zoning tools, including a workforce dwelling unit program that's enshrined as a proffer-based incentive system within our comprehensive plan, as well as an affordable dwelling unit program, which is in our zoning ordinance and is actually a zoning requirement. Since the inception of these programs, their relative inception in 2007 for the WDU program and 1990 for the ADU program, they have produced almost 5,000 affordable units. And in the last fiscal year alone, we had almost 270 WDUs delivered and nearly 90 ADUs delivered. So we've been very successful in our long history with inclusionary zoning. I will say that I'm very proud of the fact that we also completed I would call it a modernization of the WDU program so that we're able to serve provide more units at lower incomes than the program was originally designed to do. And I think with that is the end of my formal presentation. I'm happy to try to answer any questions.
Thank you, Tom, so much. Really appreciate that. Very exciting to see all the movement. Any questions for Tom in Fairfax County? Either raise your hand or feel free to put it in the chat. Helen, I see your hand up.
Yeah, Tom, I just wondered if you're seeing more for sale units coming on through the program in the last few years. Certainly, we're starting to see some of that than before with condos and other things. So I just wondered if you had a breakdown.
I don't have a breakdown with me, but yes, we are seeing more. And I will say that, I'm sure that one of the challenges that we're continuing to that we share is the continued challenge of condo fees in these ownership units.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, all right. Well, thank you so much, Tom. Great job. Really appreciate the update. Hopefully you can stay on till the end in case other questions pop up. Feel free to put them in the chat or we can regroup after the other presentations. So thank you for hanging with us for these 5 presentations. We're going to move over to Arlington County now and Ann Venezia, the housing director there. So thank you, Ann.
Thanks, Jill, and good morning, everyone. So I have the benefit of going towards the end. So You've already heard such great information from some of our partners here, but also I have the challenge of trying to keep everyone awake on this very rainy, drab Monday morning, being presentation number 4. So I'm going to do my best to try to keep this as interesting as possible and also try to stay on time here. So as Jill said, I'm Ann Venezia. I'm the housing director for Arlington. And thank you, Navaja, for hosting this and having me here today. So next slide. So I'm going to be talking through 5 efforts for 2022 that took place in Arlington County. We have some development projects that I want to highlight. We have our asset management and tenant support strategies. We have our affordable housing master plan review. In case you haven't heard of it, our missing middle housing study and our recently launched homeownership study. And as I mentioned, all of these efforts took place too. And many of these efforts will continue into 2023. So next slide. So starting with development projects in 2022, the county board approved nearly $25 million in Affordable Housing Investment Fund, or AHIF allocations, to support the creation of 234 new committed affordable units, or CAFs is what we call them in Arlington, and the rehabilitation and affordability extension of more than 457 CAFs. So additionally, the county board approved special exception site plan projects that will deliver 145 CAFs upon completion. So a lot of activity going on in this last calendar year. In addition, we had more than 250 CAFs that were delivered in the fall with 2 newly constructed projects, Terwilliger Place, which is an APA project, and the Cadence, which is a Wesley project. And then we also continued long-term planning work for 2 projects, which I'm going to go into a little more detail on now, the Barcroft and Crystal House. So first for Barcroft, following a December 2021 acquisition of the Barcroft Apartments by Jair Lynch Real Estate Partners. And for those of you who may not recall, this included a $150 million loan from the county. So it was a really significant effort for Arlington to undertake this preservation. The owner began undertaking a long-term planning process in 2022, and this process has included significant input from existing residents, really to try to reimagine the Barcroft property to include a mix of renovated units and new development, while also preserving the affordability of 1,334 existing units. So the acquisition, it has been recognized both regionally and nationally for both county and Amazon's efforts to preserve affordability and to prevent massive displacement of the residents living there now. So specifically, there were 2 awards that this project received in 2022. So I just wanted to highlight them for this group. The Washington Business Journal named the Barcroft acquisition the best financing deal in 2021. And then in September, Arlington was recognized with an award of excellence from the National Association for County, Community, and Economic Development, NACED, it's a mouthful, for its role in supporting the Barcroft Apartments acquisition. So it really is a project that required significant resources and is going to be a decades-long effort trying to renovate and also redevelop parts of the property. So over to Crystal House, in 2020, Amazon secured the land option on development rights for the undeveloped parcels at Crystal House Apartments when it helped the Washington Housing Conservancy acquire the property. So there are existing units and then there are undeveloped infill parcels. So in 2021, Amazon assigned the option to the county under an agreement to provide a minimum of 554 affordable residential units on those infill parcels, the not yet developed parcels, of which a minimum of 148 would be for households earning 50% or less of the area median income. So in December 2022, so just a couple months ago, the Arlington County Board approved an agreement to select Arlington Partnership for Affordable Housing, APA, and EYA Developments to develop the infill parcels at Crystal House Apartments. So this followed over a year-long process, both an RFQ and an RFP. It was a competitive national scale developer selection process. And specifically, we received proposals from 16 teams that represented nearly 30 developers. So it really received a lot of attention. And the agreement with APA and EYA is the first in a series of milestones that will lead to delivering all affordable units by January 2028. So this is another, again, multi-year effort, and we're really excited to work with APA and EYA on this. And so switching gears to homeownership, while our homeownership program is comparatively smaller, we did have some gains there as well. So specifically in 2022, 11 households earning up to 80% of the AMI closed on the county's Moderate Income Purchase Assistance Program loans, so MyPAP loans, to assist them with purchasing homes in Arlington. And so of those 11, 4 of the households purchased affordable dwelling units, or ADUs, at the newly constructed 2000 Clarendon Boulevard condo project. And a second newly completed condo project, Axmite Village, also is providing 4 ADUs. And the developer is currently marketing those ADUs to qualifying households. So these ADUs, for those of you who aren't as familiar with Arlington's ADU program, due to site plan, condition, and covenants, they're affordable in perpetuity and will be required to be sold and resold at prices affordable to households earning up to 80% of the AMI. So I know that was a lot of information, but that's sort of an overview of our rental and homeownership activity for last year. So switching gears, Arlington recognizes the importance of not only bringing on new supply, but also committing resources to maintaining our portfolio of multifamily rental units and providing supports for residents living in these units. And so in April of last year, we published a long-term strategies for improving oversight and tenant supports at age and CAF properties, which is a report that includes 17 strategies spanning 5 work areas to ensure that the over 11,000 committed affordable units in Arlington County are well maintained and that tenants are supported. And so we've made some progress in several areas, and I wanted to highlight a few of these areas. So since completion of the report, we've increased our inspections capacity from 5% of our committed affordable unit portfolio to over 20% of the portfolio annually. And for those of you who are familiar with local government, that's a really big move to increase our inspections capacity by that much in just under a year. So we're also hiring an additional staff person to focus on unit compliance and related strategies. And then we're also using one-time funds to reach somewhere in the range of 400 to 500 households in our committed affordable units through surveys and focus groups to learn about the resident experience and also to learn more about what additional supports may be helpful. And we're working with one of our third-party partners to administer those surveys. So given the comprehensive nature of the strategies, much of this work is going to continue into 2023 and beyond. Next slide. In 2022, we also completed our Affordable Housing Master Plan review. And so the county's Affordable Housing Master Plan was adopted in 2015 by the county board. And so this was a 5-year review, a little delayed because of COVID. And it was guided by 3 fundamental questions. The first is, how have housing needs changed in the community since adopting the Affordable Housing Master Plan? Also, what progress has the county made toward achieving goals and objectives of the master plan? And how can the county better achieve the goals and objectives of the master plan? And so 3 documents were produced through the review to answer those questions. We produced an updated housing needs analysis, a 5-year report, and an updated implementation framework, which provides direction for our future work. And just a few key takeaways from the review. None of these, I'm sure, will be surprising. The first is the need for Arlington to focus on affordability for lower income households. Also, as I mentioned on the previous slide, the importance of focusing attention on the quality and the maintenance of the affordable housing inventory. Also, a desire for expanded tenant services and incorporation of equity analysis as implementation activities are developed. And lastly, rethinking our approach to homeownership through an affordable homeownership study, which I'll get to in just a moment. Next slide. So another major effort underway in Arlington that's continuing into 2023 is our Missing Middle Housing Study. So the Missing Middle Housing Study is exploring how new housing types could better address Arlington's shortfall in housing supply and gaps in housing choices by allowing different housing types in more areas of the county. And so the study explores how construction of a greater variety of housing types, such as duplexes, triplexes, and small apartment buildings, could help increase housing choice and housing supply. And so creating these new options will help address Arlington's housing supply issues, create housing options that are hopefully less expensive than what are currently available, and to begin to dismantle the long-standing exclusionary nature of Arlington's land use policy and planning framework. And so at this month's meeting, the county board will consider draft general land use plan and zoning ordinance amendment text. And that will include options around the number of units permitted on a lot, minimum lot standards, parking, and setting a development cap, among other things. So if you haven't tuned in, if you're curious what this is all about, again, the public hearings will begin this Saturday at our March County Board meeting, and likely will be continued into next week through some carryover meetings as well. Next slide. The final effort I'd like to highlight today is Arlington's homeownership study, which launched in 2022 and will continue into 2023. And so in Arlington, the overall production of ownership units has been low in comparison to rental units over the last decade. And so you'll see on this graph that residential housing production from 2009 to 2019, that during that time period, homeownership units represented less than 10% of overall housing production. Next slide. And as a result, the average sales prices have been rising, and homeownership is becoming increasingly out of reach for many Arlington residents and workers. And so the average sales price of a detached home in 2021 was around $1.2 million in Arlington. Condos are the most affordable entry point to the housing market, and currently the average sales price is around $470,000 for a condo. Next slide. So efforts such as the county's missing middle housing study and now our homeownership study are aiming to not only increase supply, but also expand housing choice and access for ownership housing. And so our homeownership study aims to clarify the community's values and goals related to homeownership, assess opportunities for potential home buyers and existing homeowners, and determine whether existing county programs and policies support all of Arlington's homeownership goals. The study includes an analysis of the barriers to homeownership, a review of current homeownership programs, and a lot of community engagement, which is underway now. So with recommendations expected in 2023. Next slide. And this is just how you can get more information about these studies, or if you wish to follow any of the number of activities that we have under our Housing Arlington initiative, which aims to increase supply of affordable housing in Arlington. So we have our website and an email address here for you. Next slide. So I just wanted to wrap up today with a summary of some unsolved challenges, I'll call them, as well as opportunities. So for those of you who tuned in last year, some of these themes might sound familiar. So I'm often asked by community leaders, what keeps you up at night? And I do find that this question helps us focus on areas in which there remains the greatest unsolved need. So as the county emerges from the COVID-19 pandemic, Arlington, like many jurisdictions across the region, state, and nation, is faced with the challenge of keeping our most vulnerable families housed while resources wane. So with the additional state and federal government funding ending and the remaining funding returning to pre-pandemic levels, evictions seem inevitable. And in addition, as properties are aging, there is a workforce shortage in property maintenance and overcrowded units that are caused by evictions and financial hardship. And these put additional pressure on multifamily communities. So while Arlington is being proactive to meet these challenges on both the capital and subsidy side, resources are really stretched. And Arlington is unable to address these larger systemic issues alone. So this is where all of you come in. Right? So because these challenges reach beyond Arlington and our affordable communities, sustainable solutions really do require a response and advocacy within, but also outside of Arlington, to include the regional, state, and national levels. And so as an opportunity, though, I think continuing our increased regional collaboration through all of our regional partners, including Navaja and many of you who are on this call today, really do give us the greatest opportunity for sharing ideas and addressing these challenges. So look forward to continued work together with all of you, because again, we haven't quite solved it. So last slide. And again, just to thank you for the opportunity to share Arlington's work today.
That's great. Thank you, Anne, so much for this really helpful update. It's amazing to see all the progress across all the jurisdictions, especially in Arlington. I know it's been a heavy lift with missing middle and preservation and all the work that you're doing. Any questions for Anne for Arlington County? Also helpful to hear what's keeping you up at night. I think that's a great way to frame it, because no matter the progress, there's always challenges. Feel free to raise your hand or put any questions in the chat. Okay, Alice Hogan.
Good morning. Hi, Anne. If you have ideas around alternative financing sources, we see the budget for 2024 is about half of the Affordable Housing Investment Fund that we've seen in the past. So rather than doubling or tripling what we really need, we're looking at much lower than in the past. Are there other ideas at your office? I know you being a finance person before this, bonds or other ways to identify potential permanent funding sources that we might be able to advocate for in the face of this lower proposed budget for the coming year. Thank you.
Sure, yeah, I would say, so what Alice is referring to is we are in budget season right now, like many of our fellow jurisdictions, and the budget that's being proposed by our county manager for fiscal year 24 shows a reduction in our Affordable Housing Master Fund of about $9 million. So it would be about 50% of what we have had in recent years past. So anyway, I would say we're still processing that, and we're still sort of figuring out what the impacts may be, especially in the longer term. I would say recently where we have seen the greatest opportunity for leveraging really is with some of our private sector partners, which does include Amazon. But, you know, I think with some of our private sector partners, we've had opportunities to really make our local dollars go further. And so, you know, but certainly open to other ideas from folks on the call, because like I said, we're still processing this news and seeing where it will go and what the impact may be in both the short and longer term. So we would love ideas as well.
Thank you, Anne. Any questions, any thoughts, comments to share with Anne on additional financing suggestions in Arlington and frankly in all our jurisdictions? Okay, great. Well, Anne, thank you so much for being here with us. And if you're able to stay on through Helen's presentation, maybe we'll have more questions at the end. So I'm going to go ahead and turn that over to Helen McIlvaine, the Housing Director of the City of Alexandria. Thank you, Helen, for batting cleanup and kind of getting us over the finish line, but very interested in your presentation as well.
There you go. Thank you, Jill, and thank you, Hannah, and thank you to Navaja for hosting this each year. I really liked going last. I find this, the best opportunity I have to steal everybody's good ideas, and there certainly have been plenty today. But I will also say we're facing a lot of the same challenges too. So I've asked Hannah to help me with the presentation. I figured that was one fewer thing that could go wrong. And actually, Hannah, if you would just put the opening slide first, because I intentionally want to make sure, I think we all go to groundbreakings and then grand openings, and it really helps to remind us that it is the people that are the central part of our work. While we are always proud to report on our units, supporting residents to remain stably housed was clearly the work of the pandemic. And Alexandria does this in a number of ways, obviously through rental and other emergency financial assistance, but also in training like our condo governance classes, our home rehabilitation loan program, and just counseling anytime a family needs it to help them figure out their budget and whether they're ready for home ownership. So we really try to keep people central to our mission. The next slide, Hannah, is this is one you'll be very glad to see when we have a new one, a new housing master plan to talk about. But again, I just wanted to help remind everybody, when we did the housing master plan in 2013, we first adopted this idea of housing for all. And it was really to talk about creating more housing options for people at all income levels, at all life stages, all abilities. Of course, that means bringing housing costs down by being healthy and safe, energy efficient, and creating more accessibility. But this was important. We also, the city in 2021 adopted an all Alexandria resolution, which reflects our commitment to racial and social equity. So this is very much, equity is very much at the center of all we do. But this really has been a great roadmap that's informed all subsequent city investment policies. So I think now everybody has done one of these, and we're actually kind of like Haley's Comet. We did a housing summit in 2020. Right before the pandemic started, and we are now beginning the internal work for an update that we'll be sharing with you in 2024 and 2025. So the next slide really shows, there's the resolution. Thank you, Hannah. The next slide sort of graphically shows our progress, and the good news is that we are on track for our, and there may be a few animation slides here, to meet our goal. It was a modest goal of 2,000 units with new affordability by 2025. Our projects to meet this are in the development pipeline right now, being worked on. And then we also formally endorsed the Regional Housing Initiative for an additional 225 new affordable and workforce units. This was a COG-led regional housing initiative by 2030. So we are on track to meet that. We have a number of projects that have been set up in our small area plans, in CDDs that we've already worked on with partners. But as I say in the last sentence here, being able to get to the finish line really is very funding dependent, as we are all beginning to see that, funding resources, especially for some of our very big and complicated projects, frequently requires that we are successful in identifying lots of public and private resources. And I think I can say that the city abandoned, with the hope that Build Back Better and other post-pandemic promised infrastructure investments would include affordable housing. We abandoned what had been sort of our, we will save up money for a few years and then do a project, and said, we're going to start planning for these funding sources that we hope will get delivered. And so for the first time ever, we have some projects that are approved and are waiting for funding to be available. So in the next slide, and thank you, Hannah, we are want to give a little update on some of the projects we talked about last year. So thanks to Amazon's Housing Equity Fund, both Wesley Housing and now AHDC, now Housing Alexandria, were able to preserve two different properties in the Arlandria area, an area of big interest to the city because it is immediately adjacent to National Landing, where HQ2 is located. And Wesley is working on its plan for Park Square as part of probably a future assemblage in that area. And Housing Alexandria is refinancing the property. And as part of that, the city's going to put some money into some capital needs that were identified during due diligence, as well as create a small component of 40% AMI units. So we did a plan for this area. A couple of things from that were working intentionally on creating more deeply affordable units, reflecting where the neighborhoods working class incomes were, working to create a housing preference, which HUD has endorsed us doing, so that those who are residing in the neighborhood have priority as new housing resources are built. And then also Housing Alexandria has created a curriculum that we call Ready to Rent to help people who may not be aware of or know how to take the steps to be eligible for tax credit funded housing to basically qualify for housing as it's built. We also, so next to that on the right-hand side is the Glebe, Hannah, sorry, I wasn't quite ready. The Glebe Mount Vernon project. This is the big nearly 500 unit project that Housing Alexandria has been working on for a while. It'll have a blend of rental units, some home ownership units, and neighborhood serving retail. So we've been very lucky to have also, I know Loudon mentioned it's Virginia Housing Amazon Reach grant funds. And we also got a very generous award here, and that will help us get started this year. Seminary Road is our first home ownership project in a long time. Also, hopefully will be started this year, but what excites me most, it's not one of our largest projects ever, but it's a mixed ability community. And so some of the condo units are going to be reserved for folks who've been living in group homes. And to me, that is really, really thrilling that we are going to be able to help make that happen and begin to share, neighborhood, honestly, neighbor sharing space in a very amenitized area with folks who have intellectual and developmental disabilities. And then the one on the bottom right side is Wesley's Parkview 2 project. Very, very exciting. It represents both use of our residential multifamily zoning tool, which allows us to really increase density when there's going to be a significant component of 40% AMI units. And Wesley here very cleverly is using an underused swimming pool and parking area to do a new development that will add a significant number of new units, but it will also help preserve the existing building. So really very, very clever use. And this is next up on our pipeline because the amount needed from the city is substantial. We hope we'll be able to identify some non-city resources as well to get underway very soon. So the next slide is shows you Witter Place. This is on the Duke Street corridor where a new bus rapid transit system is going to be located. It is Community Housing Partners' first project in the city. And this is, 90 some units that will family sized, all 2 and 3 bedroom units, and they'll be affordable at 40 to 60% AMI. Again, using that residential multifamily zoning tool that gives density in exchange for those 40% units. I will very quickly say that CLI also has plans to expand an existing building in Arlandria. They're going to demolish it, 28 units currently, and rebuild it as 91 units. So very, very exciting in an area that needs deeply affordable housing. ARHA is redeveloping its last remaining public housing communities, and the one that is very exciting in the Braddock Metro neighborhood is Samuel Madden Homes, built in the 30s or early 40s as war house worker housing for defense workers. And the 66 units are going to be redeveloped as 532 mixed income units, but more than 325 are going to be affordable, including a huge slug of units affordable at 30% AMI. So we're really just, so I think 2 things. One, we're glad we're going to have such deeply affordable units, and we're proud to be in a community that welcomes that level of affordability, because some of the units are going to be funded based on resources that are available because other communities don't welcome deeply affordable units. And then the last one I've included, it's one of our smaller projects. It's a boarding house. It's a typology that serves people, obviously, who need housing. It has bedrooms rather than, full-scale units, but it's been operating for several decades. And during the 50s and early 60s, it was that Green Book lodging for African Americans who are not welcomed at other hotels. So it's something that we are, proud to be doing to preserve really a very interesting and historically significant, culturally significant asset. And then I have on the bottom some of our work we're going to redo our fire station affordable housing and Landmark Mall. We're going to look at building a P3 project with Hilco in Old Town North. And we're the recipients of some of the COG grant funds to study affordable housing at metro stations. And those will be feasibility studies that we wanted to just see what was possible in those areas. The next slide kind of highlights sort of the work of the last few years. There have been a number of citywide planning initiatives in which housing has been very active to ensure that housing was part of that. That wasn't always the level of collaboration we've had with planning and zoning, but we've really forged some new models to make sure that our work is kind of hand in glove. And again, wanted to point out that we completed the Arlandria Chiralagua plan. It was accelerated soon after the announcement about HQ2 to make sure we were sort of ready for what would occur there. And we are now tackling Alexandria West. And this is a very important part of the city. It's west of Quaker Lane and 395. It envelops the Beauregard plan, and I know some of the folks in this meeting were involved in that, but it contains 20% of all of the city's residential development. So very, very important housing considerations as redevelopment occurs. It is the city's most diverse area in terms of ethnicity and national origin. So we have again requested Virginia Housing Community Impact Grant funding so we can do a good job and make sure that we draw out those who live in the community who are going to be impacted. And the other thing I will say is that it includes 45% of workers considered essential during the pandemic. So making sure that we have strategies to maintain folks in the community, even as redevelopment occurs, is going to be our challenge. Next slide. Wanted to let you know about the Zoning for Housing and Housing for All initiative that is coming up. It's being led by our colleagues in planning and zoning, again, with our support. But the first few initiatives we undertook as part of this were accessory dwelling units. That was passed in 2021, and I understand that through this time, 40 units have been or in the process of being developed. So we were late to the table when it comes to accessory dwelling units, but the fact that they're occurring, we think is great, and sort of a gentle density to create more housing resources and get a better distribution, because some of the neighborhoods where these accessory dwelling units are occurring are obviously in some of the single family home neighborhoods that have been very hard to penetrate. The other thing, we've passed a co-living policy, and again, to kind of enable housing types that allow more unrelated adults to live together, sharing common areas. So the kickoff for Zoning for Housing and Housing for All is next Monday night. There are going to be a variety of speakers, and then next Tuesday all day. And we're going to sort of start with how did Alexandria get here, including taking a pretty hard look at our past and sort of historic development patterns and the segregation that we have. And I think thanks to our work with COG as part of the many jurisdictions involved with the Regional Housing Initiative, we really look at housing more broadly. We look at tools that both increase housing production, because that helps create access and moderate prices, but also some things that will increase, obviously, true committed housing affordability. But we're now saying maybe not all housing has to be committed affordable housing if we're introducing types like accessory dwelling units and like potentially offices that convert and just come in at a different price point that is more affordable by their nature. I put the boarding house in that category too. Last thing I would say, next slide, thanks Hannah, is that we are planning to do a housing master plan update. And of course, it's going to be informed by all the things that have happened before, as well as the regional fair housing plan that I know some of you are looking at and providing comments for. Again, this was a multi-year effort that was convened by COG and a consultant team. And we're going to look at, what are some of the things we need to do to enable the recommendations of that plan and not see a big part of the city that only has, single family homes and is predominantly white. The other thing I will say, we're taking a fresh look at home ownership. So I'm always glad when I'm aligned with what Arlington is doing, but I think we also have just systemic inequities in our housing market that need to be addressed, and we will be taking a look at them. Looking at enhancing our tenant protections, and for Alexandria, this requires that we get some legislative authority to do that from the General Assembly. But this is one of the things that we hope to sort of rally the troops around through our planning effort. Also looking at what are the tools we have to get a better geographic distribution of housing. I know we kind of set off a big fire alarm when we talked about co-location with schools a few years ago, but we have some land in Potomac Yard and it's not in an existing neighborhood, and maybe that will be a good entry point for us to show our neighbors that it's a model that can work. But we're clearly in all of our plans looking at how can we put housing where with other uses, and that's clearly been a good place. Looking at new housing typologies, and then I think thinking about all of our futures, how can we create more senior housing and care options? And this is a huge dilemma as we look at the number of folks aging in all of our communities. And while we a few years ago, we were very much in a moment where a lot of these communities were coming online and we were able to get affordable units, but clearly at some point we have to come up with a more sustainable and responsive model. And then we're going to take a second swing at housing contributions and inclusionary zoning. When we looked at it a few years ago, we were told by our consultants that the policies the city had with some of the changes we were going to implement was helping us keep pace with most of our other regional partner jurisdictions. But it's certainly something, hearing Tom's numbers earlier, it's something we certainly have on deck to look at again. And then in terms of what keeps me up at night, and as Anne was saying it, I was thinking some of you may be familiar with a book for kids called Go Dogs Go. And they're having this marvelous party in the middle of the night. And I think that's the housing directors need to do that some night when we're all up and get on Zoom and talk about what's keeping us up. But I think when we talk about our challenges is if you are really centering all of your policies, all of your decisions, and all of your planning on inequity, it's a pretty big lift for most of us. So how do we really do that? How do we conduct truly culturally competent outreach? How do we engage with people who are going to be impacted by our decisions? So I think that's a challenge that we are working very hard to meet. When it comes to funding, obviously finding resources that are not city general fund money is going to be increasingly important to both be able to accomplish the projects in our pipeline as well as stay nimble for opportunities when they arise. I think for us, looking and saying, how do we balance development with a risk of gentrification. I know some of us have worried over the years, has our investment in affordable housing to some extent, catalyzed the market and changed prices. So I think these are all issues that we ought to look at. And the other thing, that whether if we can't build our way out of it, how do we create more opportunities to really create options for people to become more economically mobile? And how can we help all the folks who live in our communities, earn more, identify other resources that will help them? And then the last thing, of course, we're going to be spending a lot of time preparing for the housing master plan update. And as Ann said, we take quite seriously monitoring the portfolio of properties in which we've invested. And we want to continue our efforts. Last year, we were able to visit every property in which the city had invested money. And I think that's going to continue to be, as well as the ones we get through the development process. And that's obviously a standard we want to try to continue to reach, so that as we go to our shareholders and the residents of our city, we can report that their money is being well spent. So that completes my remarks, and I'm glad to answer questions.
Thank you, Helen. That was excellent and great point about maintaining equity in the center of all the work that we're doing. I really appreciate you adding that. I think, obviously our local jurisdictions, as well as housing practitioners and advocacy groups as well, can continue to do that. So appreciate that. Any questions for Helen? Feel free to put them in the chat or raise your hand. Okay, I'm not seeing any, but any questions for any of our presenters, any comments? I know this large Zoom format is sometimes difficult to have discussion or conversation around it, but open to that. I did see that Cheryl stated that she understands that we're about $80 million short in funding for the pipeline projects in Alexandria, and if there are any ideas about how to cover that, Helen.
Well, we have, so last year we were very lucky because City Council also put in some ARPA funds. So we had for us a very big year. We have been, and they increased the penny, which had, basically been reduced to 6/10 of a penny. They reduced it to a full penny. So we're starting off this year with about $10 million. And we would not, obviously that's, 8 years of aggregating funding to take care of that pipeline. But I will say we are working very, very hard, not only to identify non-city sources, but to take advantage. Last weekend, did a grant application for, there's obviously some infrastructure money, some money for energy efficiency. So we are looking at all of those. And frankly, I think, as some of us have talked about Amazon, how can we create maybe more long-term financial partnerships with some of the groups that really want to get into housing impact work. So we're hoping for more partners. Virginia Housing has certainly been a very steady partner. I think we're all sort of, the size and complexity of projects is also something, we have to look at. I'm not suggesting at all we change it, but I think when we talk about projects that are, several hundred units, it's just a much bigger price tag, and the impact is very, very great. So it's something, frankly, we're grappling with, but we hope through a number of different approaches we're going to do it. And our Housing Affordability Committee has recently asked to be more active in decisions about how we prioritize what's in the pipeline. So it's something we take seriously. Council has asked AHAC to become more involved in providing guidance, and I think they're eager to do so. So we're going to look at this. The other thing I will say, Cheryl, is that, I think all of us are trying to figure out how do we get more out of development. And so that's why things like the zoning for housing initiative and looking at inclusionary zoning and, sometimes I know in the past Alexandria was loath to do anything that was sort of automatic. But I look at the success of our, RMF zone, and especially with the project that started last year, the Heritage Project, where really a private developer is, because they got the density to make up what they needed, is going to preserve, 200 some units in exchange for being able to do a big number of market rate units. So I think we've got to sometimes do that more when we have private developers and say, what will it take to accomplish our goals?
Excellent. Thank you, Helen. Another question in the chat is about the rooming house property and what the profile of the residents who live there are, and if it's a serviced enriched property. You can speak a little bit more to that.
Yeah, so it's interesting. No, it's just sort of developed over time. And so there are people that I think used to gently be called pensioners. So people who have aged in place and are on fixed incomes. It has had, couples. It has, this was a few months ago, but it had a Fairfax, a nurse from Fairfax Hospital. It has folks who work in retail stores. So it's really been very, diverse. And I came across that there was another boarding house. Alexandria had several of these at one point. And I helped during 2020 relocate some folks who were demolishing the building in which a boarding house was located. And so, we were there on a week after everyone was supposed to have moved out. And I was ferrying folks to this other boarding house. At the time, fortunately, they had a couple of vacancies. And one of the men who was moving in was a guy who had been a retired architect. So it is a place that is, the rents currently are like $400 to $800. And I know two of the residents have lived there since the early 1970s. So it is something, and it exists in plain sight. And I think people will be delighted. It's pretty dilapidated. In terms of case management, Carpenter Shelter has made referrals to the property, and there's sort of an informal case management system, but that is one of the things. It's privately owned, and it will stay privately owned. The family's owned it since the 1920s, wants to rehabilitate it, and wants its use as a boarding house to continue. So we're working with them to provide some supports going forward, but it's also really a proof that there are great initiatives happening privately as well.
Great, thank you. Carmen had a question in the chat if there's a coordinated housing policy approach as it relates to outreach to the state and corporate partners to leverage a collective voice. So that is an interesting question. I don't know that Navaja has really taken that on, but certainly that we could help shepherd. I don't know if anybody in the jurisdictions or local, the housing directors have talked about that. I know you are in frequent communication with state partners and the corporate partners as well. So I don't know if any of you want to speak to that.
Well, I was just going to say, I think we all felt very hopeful at the governor's housing conference when the governor spoke about some of his ideas about getting, I will say, I don't recall a lot of words about money, but about, sort of creating incentives for zoning initiatives that would result in more units. But I think it would be a great thing to take on collectively. We'll let others speak.
Just to, I guess, continue some of Helen's thought there. I think it would be fantastic if some folks on this call who work more in the advocacy space are able to take some of that on. That would be fantastic. We have, the tools, at least in Arlington, given how we're set up, we're a little more limited in terms of what we can be doing directly as a local government. So yeah, if there are opportunities for others on this call who work more in the advocacy space, I think, you know, we always welcome that.
Yeah, definitely interested in continuing that conversation. Any other thoughts from any of the other jurisdictions or any other final questions from our panelists or our panelists? All right. Well, I just want to take the opportunity again to thank Joni, who had to leave, John Hall, Tom Fleetwood, Ann Venezia, and Helen McIlvaine. It's really a true privilege for everybody on Leadership Council to be able to hear from all of you at one long sitting, I know, but a lot of incredible information. We will be sharing the presentations with all of you. We, I think, recorded most of today's session, and we'll be linking that as well. But really, it's invaluable information for all of us to get at one time. So thank you for your continued partnership. Let's keep the conversations open, how we can increase resources and be strategic about our partners and letting them know what we need here in Northern Virginia to obviously deal with our affordable housing needs. So thank you to all. Just a few very brief kind of wrap up comments for Leadership Council. We have some upcoming events that are happening. If you don't know, we're working with Alliance for Housing Solutions on a community conversation lunch and learn around local budget advocacy. So this isn't necessarily for housing practitioners, although everyone from Leadership Council is welcome, but it's really a housing kind of advocacy 101. Alice Hogan from AHS is going to be our featured speaker. It will be region wide, but she'll share some of the best practices that AHS has done over the years in Arlington. It's really, again, designed to help those who really haven't participated in local budget advocacy in the past get some best practices and strategic resources. So feel free to share those announcements with your resident services groups or tenant groups. We'd love to get more advocates with lived experiences coming before our elected officials to advocate for more affordable housing spending. In addition, we will be hosting another Rising Housing Leaders Network. We're going to have a conversation with a few of our CEOs, so look for that probably in April. Hannah has done a great job kind of shepherding that young group of rising leaders. We had a housing tour last month, and looking forward to this next event. And then finally, we have May 18th, as Save the Date just went out, about our celebration for Michelle Crocker and all of her work and looking ahead to Navaja's future. So hope you can join us there in the evening at JBG Smith's National Landing Experience Center in National Landing. Thanks to Bailey Edelson for helping us secure that amazing space. It'll be a really fun party. So more to come on that as well. Our next meeting will be Monday, May 8th. We are due to be in person. We are going hybrid version this year, one meeting in person, one virtual. So look forward to seeing you all in person. Hopefully we'll be at AHC again. I know Paul Bernard has been so kind, and Jennifer Endo, in hosting us all these years, and going forward, I think it's a great meeting space for us at 10 o'clock. So more to come on that about our topic and speakers. And we will be continuing the conversation about expanding our Leadership Council. Thank you to Cornerstones and Volunteers of America who are joined today. And always interested, if you know other partners who might be interested in joining Leadership Council, we'll be talking about the expansion. So thanks to all. Have a wonderful day. Enjoy. The Navaja board will meet. We're going to give everybody a 10-minute break. So log on to the next Zoom at 5 after 12. And thank you again to Hannah for providing all the great technical support. And we'll see you soon. Thank you.
Thank you.